Hi scholars, it's Miss McKinney again. We're going to do read aloud and we're going to finish Charlotte's Web. So before we finish Charlotte's Web, we have to go over character perspective. And character perspective is what a character thinks or believes to be true about another character, the conflict, or a moment in the text. So, as we looked at our big ideas and our evidence from last time, we talked about Fern and her father in the two different perspectives. We know that Fern thinks it's not fair that her dad should kill the pig, but dad thinks that it's normal to kill the pigs. Then, in our second one, we talked about Fern's perspective about Wilbur. We know that Fern loves Wilbur, and she loved him like it was her own little baby, and we made sure that we found our evidence in the text. Miss McKinney forgot to put the text evidence here with the page number, but we made sure that we did it for chapter 2. Now, scholars, for chapter 3, we're going to talk about Wilbur's perspective. We ended up talking about Wilbur going to a different farm. Say, oh no. Now, if you follow the PDF that I have attached for you, we can read chapter 3 together. I have my big ideas already on my board. You can pause the video if you want to look and see what the big ideas are. And as we go, you can find the text evidence. Here I am, chapter 3, Escape. The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay and it smelled of manure. It's like stinky. It smelled of the perspiration of tired horses and the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had sort of a peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could ever happen again in the world. It smelled of grain and a harness dressing of an axle grease and of rubber boots and a new rope. And whenever the cat was given a fish head to eat, the barn would smell of fish like P.U. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft overhead. And there was always hay being pitched down to the cows and the horses and the sheep. The barn was pleasantly warm in the winter when the animals spent most of their time indoors, and it was pleasantly cool in the summer when the big door stood wide open for the breeze. The barn had stalls on the main floor for the work horses, tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, a sheepfold down below for the sheep, and a pig pen down below for Wilbur. And it was full of sorts of things that you can find in barns, like ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, lawnmowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty grain sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows like to build in their nests in. And it was the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman. Remember, we know that Wilbur has now been sold to her Uncle Fern, so now Wilbur is at the farm. And I've noticed that the author, E.B. White, has told us so much about this barn. I'm wondering what Wilbur's perspective of the barn is going to be. Wilbur's new home was in the lower part of the barn, directly underneath the cows. Mr. Zuckerman knew the manure pile is a good place to keep a young pig. Pigs need warmth, and it was warm and comfortable down there in the barn cellar in the south side. Fern came almost every day to visit him. She found an old milking stool that had been discarded, and she placed the stool in the sheepfold next to Wilbur's pen. Here she sat quietly the long afternoons, thinking and listening and watching Wilbur. The sheep soon got to know her and trust her. So did the geese who lived with the sheep. All the animals trusted her. She was so quiet and friendly. Mr. Zuckerman did not allow her to take Wilbur out, and he did not allow her to get into the pig pen. But he told Fern that she could sit on the stool and watch Wilbur as long as she wanted to. So I'm noticing that Uncle Homer is not letting Fern go into the pen to see Wilbur, but instead she can sit outside and watch him play. It made her happy just to be near the pig, and it made Wilbur happy to know that she was sitting there right outside his pen. But he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims. One afternoon in June, when Wilbur was almost 2 months old, he wandered out into his small yard outside the barn. Fern had not arrived for her usual visit. Uh-oh. Wilbur stood in the sun, feeling lonely and bored. We're thinking about Wilbur's perspective. You can take a pause at the video if you would like and write this big idea. Wilbur thinks that the barn is boring. He wants something more exciting. Let's keep reading. There's never anything to do around here, he thought. He walked around slowly to his food, though he sniffed and tried to see if anything had been overlooked at lunch. He found a small strip of potato skin and ate it. His back itched, so he leaned against the fence to rub against the boards. When he tired of this, he walked indoors, climbed on top of the manure pile, and sat down. He didn't feel like going to sleep. He didn't feel like digging. He was tired of standing still and laying down. I'm less than 2 months old and tired of living. He walked out into the yard again. When I'm out here, he said, there's no place to go but in. When I'm outdoors, there's no place but to go out to the yard. That's where you're wrong, my friend, said a voice. I'm going to freeze there, and I'm going to find some text evidence that talks about what Wilbur thinks about the barn being boring. I think I found some evidence on page 16. You can write as I write. Make sure you write the page number. Miss McKinney forgot that last time. Here's the page number. Page 16. And I'm going to make sure that I use my book to write the exact thing that comes out of the book. Let's see. Wilbur stood in the sun feeling lonely and bored. Make sure you're writing that down. Page 16. And then I found another piece of evidence on page 16 as well that talks about it. But, put your quotation marks, he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims. I found 2 pieces of evidence to support my big idea. You may pause the video if you want to copy this that I wrote if Miss McKinney was going too fast. Now we're going to look at our next big idea. Let's keep reading. I am on page 17. Wilbur looked through the fence and saw Goose standing there. You don't have to stay in that dirty little yard, said Goose, who talked rather fast. One of the boards is loose. We have a new character named Goose. And I'm noticing on my big ideas chart, we need to think about Goose's perspective. Push on it. Push on it and come out. What? Said Wilbur. Say it slower. At risk of repeating myself, said Goose, I suggest that you come on out. It's wonderful out here. Did you say a board was loose? That I did, said Goose. Wilbur walked up to the fence and saw that Goose was right. One board was loose. He put his head down, shut his eyes, and pushed. The board gave away. Oh my goodness, I think Wilbur's going to get out. In a minute, he had squeezed through the fence and was standing in the long grass outside his yard. The goose chuckled. How does it feel to be free? She asked. I like it, said Wilbur. That is, I guess I like it. Actually, Wilbur felt queer to be outside his fence, with nothing between him and the big world. And queer just means different. So that means that Wilbur felt a little different being outside of his pig pen. Where do you think I'd better go? Anywhere you like. Anywhere you like, said the goose. Go down the orchard, root up the sod. Go down through the garden, dig up the radishes, root up everything, eat grass, look for corn. Look for oats, run all over, skip and dance and jump and prance. Go through the orchard and stroll through the woods. The world is a wonderful place when you're young. I can see that, replied Wilbur. I'm going to freeze right there and think about Goose's perspective. I see that Goose wants to convince Wilbur that freedom is wonderful. But I'm thinking that Wilbur isn't so sure about that. So let me go back and find my text evidence, and you can write what Miss McKinney writes. I am thinking about Goose wanting to convince that Wilbur's freedom is better than being inside the pig pen. Let me see. Oh, I see here on page 17. I'm going to make sure I write page 17. It says, quotation marks, how does it feel to be free? This is what Goose asked Wilbur as soon as he got out of his pig pen. How does it feel to be free? I like it. Well, I guess I like it. This is what Wilbur said back to Goose. Remember, we're thinking about evidence of our big idea. And I think I found something on page 18 as well that talked about what Goose was saying about how good it is to be outside. Let's see. Here it is. Page 18. The world is a wonderful... Remember, you can pause the video if Miss McKinney is going too fast. It's a wonderful place when you're young. Don't forget your quotation marks. Well, I see we have two big ideas in the evidence that have already been answered. Let's keep reading chapter 3 to find our last big idea. We know that Wilbur thinks that it's boring. And then Goose wants to make sure that he gets his freedom and see if it's fun. But Wilbur isn't too sure about that. Let's keep reading. I can see that, replied Wilbur. He gave a jump in the air, twirled and ran a few steps, stopped and looked all around, sniffed the smells of afternoon, then set off walking down through the orchard. Pausing in the shade of an apple tree, he put his strong snout in the ground and began pushing and digging and rooting. He felt very happy. He had plowed up quite a piece of ground before anyone noticed him. Mrs. Zuckerman was the first to see him. He saw that from the kitchen window, and she immediately shouted for the men. Homer! Pigs out! Lurvy! Pigs out! Homer! Lurvy! Pigs out! He's down underneath that apple tree. Now the trouble starts, thought Wilbur. Now I'll catch it. The goose heard the racket, and she started hollering, Run, run, run! Down the hill for the woods! The woods! She shouted to Wilbur. They'll never, 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 never catch you in the woods. The Cocker Spaniel heard the commotion, and he ran from the barn to join the chase. Mr. Zuckerman heard, and he came out of the machine shed where he was mending a tool. Lurvy! The hired man heard the noise and came up from the asparagus patch where he was pulling weeds. Everyone walked toward Wilbur, and Wilbur didn't know what to do. The woods seemed a long way off, and anyway, he had never been down there and wasn't sure that he would like it. Get around behind him, Lurvy, said Mr. Zuckerman, and drive him toward the barn. And take it easy. Don't rush him. I'll go get the bucket of slops. The news of Wilbur's escape spread it rapidly along the animals out the place. Wherever any creature broke loose on Zuckerman's farm, the event was great interest to others. The goose shouted to the nearest cow that Wilbur was free, and soon all the cows knew. Then one of the cows told the sheep, and then soon all the sheep knew. The lambs learned about it from their mothers. The horses in their stalls in the barn pricked up their ears when they heard the goose hollering. And soon the horses had caught on to what was happening. "Wilbur's out," they yelled. Every animal stirred and lifted his head and became excited to know that one of his friends got free and was no longer pinned up or tied fast. Wilbur didn't know what to do and which way to run. It seemed as though everyone was after him. If this was what it's like to be free, he thought, I believe I'd rather be pinned up in my own yard. The Cocker Spaniel was sneaking up on him from one side. Lurvy hired the man sneaking up on him from the other side. Mrs. Zuckerman stood ready to head him off if he started for the garden. And now Mr. Zuckerman was coming down toward him, carrying a pail. This is really awful, thought Wilbur. Why doesn't Fern come? He began to cry. The goose took command and began to give orders. Don't just stand there, Wilbur. Dodge about, cried Goose. Skip around, run toward me, slip in and out, in and out, in and out. Make for the woods, twist and turn. The Cocker Spaniel sprang for Wilbur's hind leg. Wilbur jumped and ran. Lurvy reached out and grabbed. Mrs. Zuckerman screamed at Lurvy. The goose cheered for Wilbur. Wilbur dodged between Lurvy's legs. Lurvy missed Wilbur and grabbed the Cocker Spaniel instead. Nicely done, cried Goose. Try it again. Run downhill, suggested the cows. Run toward me, yelled the gander. Run uphill, cried the sheep. Turn and twist, honked the goose. Jump and dance, said the rooster. Look out, Lurvy, cried the crows. Look out, Zuckerman, yelled the gander. Watch out for the dog, cried the sheep. Listen to me, screamed the goose. Poor Wilbur, dazed and frightened by his hullaboo. He didn't like being the center of all this fuss. He tried to follow the instructions his friends were giving him, but he couldn't run downhill and uphill at the same time. He couldn't turn and twist when he was jumping and dancing, and was crying so hard he could barely see what was happening. After all, Wilbur was a very young pig, not much more than a baby, really. He wished Fern were there to take him in the arms and comfort him. When he looked up and saw Mr. Zuckerman standing quite close to him, holding a pail of warm slops, he felt relieved. He lifted his nose and sniffed. The smell was delicious. Warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, Kellogg's cornflakes, and a popover left from Zuckerman's breakfast. Come, pig, said Mr. Zuckerman, tapping the pail. Come, pig. Wilbur took a step toward the pail. No, said the goose. It's the old pail trick, Wilbur. Don't fall for it. He's trying to lure you back into captivity. He's appealing your stomach. Wilbur didn't care. The food smelled appetizing. He took another step toward the pail. Pig, said Mr. Zuckerman in a kind voice, and began walking slowly toward the barnyard, looking about him innocently as if he didn't know that a little white pig was following along behind him. You'll be sorry, called the goose. Wilbur didn't care. He kept walking toward the pail of slops. You'll miss your freedom, honked the goose. An hour of freedom is worth a barrel of slops. Wilbur didn't care. When Mr. Zuckerman reached the pig pen, he climbed over the fence and poured the slops into the trough. He pulled the loose board away from the fence so there was a wide hole for Wilbur to walk through. Reconsider, said Goose. Wilbur paid no attention. He stepped through the fence into his yard. He walked to the trough and took a long drink of the slops, sucking in the milk hungrily and chewing the popover. It was good to be home again. While Wilbur ate, Lurvy fetched a hammer and some 8-penny nails and nailed the board in place. Uh-oh, I'm noticing Wilbur can't get back out now. Then he and Mr. Zuckerman leaned lazily on the fence, and Mr. Zuckerman scratched Wilbur's back with a stick. He's quite a pig, said Lurvy. Yes, he'll make a good pig, said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur heard the words of praise. He felt warm milk inside his stomach. He felt the pleasant rubbing of the stick along his itchy back. He felt peaceful, happy, and sleepy. This had been a tiring afternoon. It was still only about 4 o'clock, but Wilbur was ready for bed. I'm really too young to go out into the world alone, he said as he lay down. So scholars, I have my last big piece, my big idea, and now I need to find my evidence for it. I don't think I'm going to find the evidence. I'm going to let you scholars go back into chapter 3 and find at least 2 pieces of evidence that talks about this big idea. My big idea says, Wilbur feels afraid and upset that everyone is after him. He thinks that it's better to be inside of his pen. There are lots of evidence that you can find that talks about how Wilbur thinks it's better to be inside of his pen. So I can't wait to see you complete the task of finding my 2 pieces of evidence for my big idea. Don't forget your page numbers.